Back with Hotel D'Amico. We got some new faces here. Cam Knights is sitting in. Steve D'Amico's sitting in. But our guest, who I'm excited about, filmmaker, adventurer, cryptozoologist. You might know him from Small Town Monsters. Bigfoot Beyond Trail, Aleks Petakov. Thanks for coming in, man.
Yeah, how's it going, guys? Thanks for having me.
Before we jump into exactly what it is you do, I figured we'd get some background on you. You were born in South Africa?
Yeah, that's a long story, but we can get into that. My parents were from a country called Yugoslavia that doesn't exist anymore, broke apart. You know, it's kind of morbid to say, but it doesn't.
No, it's Serbia now.
It's Serbia, Croatia,
Serbia now.
Bosnia, Montenegro, Slovenia, like the list, Macedonia. There's way too many countries came out of one. So they left in 1991 when the war was started, and then they were in South Africa. My dad, he was working in a Swiss missionary hospital. So I was born there in 1993, and then South Africa started getting kind of dangerous. There's a lot of crime. They were talking about, South Africa is going to fall apart, and my parents were like, "Yeah, let's try America. Hopefully, America doesn't fall apart."
So you didn't quite flee; you just kind of made your way over here.
Yeah. They weren't really. They were like, "We just escaped one war. The last thing we need is another one." And here we are, 30 years later in America, and
I was going to say
things are interesting.
You're complaining about New Orleans, South Africa, bud.
Yeah, it's carjacking capital of the world. Yeah, it's.
South Africa is?
Yeah. I mean, it's so dangerous. I was there in 2015. I went when I was still in school, and my God, I mean, there's people trying to rob you left and right, scams. We were in Cape Town in 2014, the Victoria and Alfred Shopping Center, which is like one of the nicest shopping centers in South Africa. All of a sudden, these alarms start ringing. There's like guys with AK-47s running the other direction. It was like a smash and grab type robbery. I'm just like, this is the nicest part of South Africa, right? It's like, I couldn't believe it. But
yeah, I saw a 90 Day Fiance episode where the girl's dating a guy from South Africa in Cape Town, and every time she goes there, like they're getting robbed multiple times. She's
crazy.
like, I'm getting robbed every time I'm here.
So I've only been back once, but yeah, so I was born there, and my parents were like, yeah, we want to get out. We lived in Johannesburg for a little bit, and it's just, I don't know, I don't want to say life is cheap, but over there it was just, they would kill you over nothing. I mean, we were kind of talking about New Orleans before, getting robbed, and first they kill you and then rob you. It's like, that's just, you don't want to live in that kind of situation. So my folks and I came over to the U.S. in like 1996.
Where did you end up? New Hampshire?
Lived first in New York City, actually.
Oh, really?
It's probably why I don't like New York very much.
New York City sucks.
Yes. Yeah, very much. I agree.
It's the Wild West out there right now.
Yeah, dirty and smelly. And I remember, okay, this is crazy. So we lived we were in the Upper East Side, which sounds nice, but we were in this tiny little apartment, and we were immigrants. So we didn't have anything. And we had a rat crawl up our toilet once. Like, I shit you not. It was probably one of the most disturbing things I still remember.
How did you know it crawled up is my question.
I mean, it just came out of the freaking toilet bowl.
I was looking for some fermented cheese.
It came, I don't know. Yeah, rats are.
Did you feel it or you saw it?
No, I mean, I just remember there being a rat that came up the damn
New
toilet.
New York.
Cockroaches. Yeah, it's a charm, right? It's like greatest city in the world. Yeah, right. But
No,
yeah, so we were in New York City for a few years. Didn't like it. My dad was doing his residency there, and then we came up here to New England. So from that point on, we were in New Hampshire, and that's where I've grown up and lived most of my life. And I like New Hampshire a lot. It's a good place, and yeah, I guess that's the story.
So do you feel like growing up, living in multiple different places and having a worldly view kind of led you down the path you're on now in terms of like exploring different parts of the world professionally?
Yeah, I think so. A little bit. I mean, I've always been into wanting to explore, and I mean, the world is such a huge place. There's a lot of interesting stuff to see, and it's unfortunate that life is seemingly so short, because you can spend a lifetime just exploring one part of the U.S., let alone checking out the whole country, and you've got the whole world. But I guess I was lucky that I grew up going back to Serbia and Croatia and that part of the world. So I got to see kind of that perspective, spent a little bit of time traveling in Europe, in Asia as well, and then like South Africa, as I was talking about, and then exploring different parts of the U.S. So I've always kind of been interested in that stuff, and adventure, and I think the mysteries of the world, there's a lot of them, whether they be Bigfoot or mystery places like the Bridgewater Triangle, not that far from us. There's a lot of intrigue, it makes the world a more interesting place too. If you think about it, it's all just boring and there's nothing to see out there. I mean, what's the point?
Well,
right?
I think you said it right there. When there's nothing to see, things go on, right?
And then also it's like cultures come and go over thousands of years, but allegedly these creatures are spanning much longer than that. And it's providing like a greater perspective of this entire experience beyond like my iPhone 8.
Yeah, right. Well, yeah, I think modern times we're just so, we have everything at our fingertips, which is crazy because you have like a supercomputer here that's more advanced than NASA had in the 60s. Yet people, I think, are more narrow focused now, a lot of them than before. But like you said, the folklore element was interesting. You have different groups of people around the world that are not connected at all, don't speak the same languages, but they have similar stories, whether they be cautionary tales like some of these tribes in North America that talk about, in the woods, you have these Sasquatch-like creatures, and they would use that to warn their children and their women not to go too far into the woods. And whether or not they were talking about a real creature, in their view, they were. But that is a cautionary tale that for them, they can say, hey, kids, don't go out into the woods or, the Zonoqua is going to get you. And in reality, what's that? That's preventing the kid from maybe getting eaten by a mountain lion, falling down a cliff and dying. So it's like a cautionary tale. Maybe there is a reality that's the origin of it, but it serves, I think, a bigger purpose. And folklore in general in human society it's always been here. It's not going away. Well, we have urban legends now, right? Like you've got alligators in the sewers in New York. I'm talking about New York. Like that's an urban legend. That's just a story that comes up that maybe it was based off of one incident, but a lot of people now think it might be real. So,
well, you did have a rat come out of your toilet.
I honestly would have preferred an alligator. I would have preferred an alligator. That would have been cooler, right? A rat.
You see like the big pythons in Asian countries.
Yeah,
that come
Florida.
up.
Anacondas.
Florida, they got the invasive the pythons there.
Yeah.
Those are crazy. We've searched for them down there because I've been down the Everglades a bunch. Really fascinating area. It's like the Australia of America. Everything wants to kill you. You've got cottonmouth snakes, rattlesnakes, Florida panthers, bears,
South Beach
skunk
tourists.
apes. Apparently,
Well, the Florida Panthers suck at hockey, so I wouldn't really worry.
Isn't there
about
rumor that there's monkeys in Florida?
there's okay. So Ocala National Forest or Ocala, Florida. There's
The Okeechobee.
yes or something. It's Crystal River or Crystal Springs, something like that, where there's this group of monkeys that escaped from some. It was like a Tarzan show they had way back in the
I think
day.
they hang out by like the airport or something.
These monkeys live out there. man.
Literally?
Like,
Yeah, they hang out. They hang out and
it's
shoot
crazy. I think
dice.
a few years ago, we were down there in Florida, and we're in Ocala, and they're like, you can go to this park. It's a state park, and there's legitimately monkeys that live there. And they had Hep C, apparently. I shit you not. I mean, this is like, Google it. Look up Florida monkeys Hep C. It's the most Florida story you'll see, right? It's crazy.
It's probably not even front page news.
That's
It's definitely
Probably
not
not
the
the
most
crazy-
Florida story you'll
but
see.
it fits into that whole Florida man thing. But it's so we went looking for these monkeys. We didn't see any of them. Apparently it was too cold that day. But they had an outbreak of Hep C, and they were warning people. And there's videos on YouTube of these monkeys going and like attacking people's picnics. Like they'll be in a state park, and these monkeys just descend out of the trees, start ripping people's food away. I mean, it's some pretty nutty
So,
shit.
Alex, let me get this straight from what you were just saying. You literally went searching for Hep C.
No, we didn't know this was not at the time
Got
that
gonorrhea
outbreak
from
was
attractants.
reported. The outbreak was not reported then, but the monkeys were there apparently. We didn't see any. We were just driving by and we're like, oh, wouldn't this be funny to go look for?
Were you in that area in that video where you were like, there's a lot of videos where you make pasta, but I remember watching one where you were in Central Florida. I think you were by yourself and you were like making pasta and you had sauce and everything. Was that like
That might be one of them, yeah, because I know if it was the Florida stuff, it was myself and two other of my buddies that were with me, and yeah, we were doing like burgers and pasta. I mean, when you were camping for like 2 weeks straight, you gotta think of some creative food options out there. But
You're having Sunday dinner in the Everglades.
yeah, pretty much. I mean, we tried. We tried when we were out there. But yeah, Florida's actually cool because there's a lot of those natural areas you go to that. Like you go to Florida, you wouldn't expect that. You go to Tampa, Miami, Orlando, whatever, it's all built up. But you drive a couple hours out and you're in like some serious wilderness. I mean, out in the Everglades, you've got protected areas that are larger, like twice the size of Rhode Island. And it's all just no development. It's just raw wilderness.
Is there undiscovered species in the Everglades, you think?
Maybe. I mean, I don't know. I could imagine some little stuff, some like smaller creatures. Of course, there's the stories of the skunk ape, like kind of related to the Bigfoot stuff, but they have a population of Florida panthers down there that are basically just mountain lions that live in the swamp.
What's the skunk ape, if you don't mind?
The skunk ape is like it's basically a Florida version of a Bigfoot type story. So it's reported in the swamps of Florida and kind of in other parts of the South. It's very similar to your Bigfoot story, a little bit more shaggy hair description in some of the skunk ape stuff, and a little bit shorter than maybe some of the ones that are reported elsewhere in the U.S. But I mean, stories have been there for a while. We've interviewed some witnesses down there. Like I said, I was shocked at how much wilderness there actually is out there. I didn't expect it. I mean, I grew up going to Florida, and you go to Disney or whatever, and it's like you think Florida, like it's a beach place, right? But I mean, you have to realize in between those coasts, there's nothing.
Hep C.
There's monkeys with Hep C.
Do you find that
it's very crazy?
Most of these mythical creatures, are they more centrally located in like North America versus Europe and other continents, or is that just more where there's been more evidence and investigation? Because like, do you hear about these creatures besides like Loch Ness? Like, do you hear about these creatures like popping up in Europe and Asia?
I guess it depends on which ones you're talking about. I mean, you've got like cryptozoology. There's a big spectrum of cryptids, and I think most of them probably aren't real. Most of them are more folkloric, mythological. But you have stuff like lake monsters. They're found in a lot of different places. You've got Loch Ness, a bunch of lakes in North America, Lake Champlain here in Vermont / New York. Then you have like mystery hominids, like Bigfoot type creatures, and those are reported in quite a few different places.
There's one in Louisiana, right?
Yeah,
North Carolina.
Yeah, but I mean that's like in North America. There's stories all over. Where there's like good wilderness, typically there's stories. But you've got the Yeti in the Himalayas, so that's like one of them. That was even well known before even Bigfoot in North America or Sasquatch in Canada. You've got stuff in Southeast Asia. There's even like pretty credible stories of people during the Vietnam War, soldiers coming across what they thought were like North Vietnamese combatants, and they were like 4 to 5 foot hairy ape-like creatures. And Vietnam and that whole southeast part of Asia, I mean, they discovered the largest cave on Earth in like the 90s there. I mean, it's unbelievable. And there was a species of deer that was discovered there, I think, in the early 2000s. So we're talking like a deer-sized animal that wasn't discovered during any of the crazy wars that happened in that region for decades.
Well, who's really looking, right?
I mean, especially in a place like Vietnam, or Cambodia, or Laos, there's a lot of these jungles. No one's going there. You've got the orang pendek in Sumatra in Indonesia, which is reported as this smaller kind of Bigfoot-like creature. What's really interesting is you have an island in Indonesia called Flores, where they discovered this hominid creature called the Homo floresiensis. That's the kind of scientific name, but they nicknamed it the Hobbit, because it was like a 3 to 4 foot tall. It was a Homo genus, so it's related to Homo sapiens, Homo neanderthals, and this creature was apparently living as recently as like 20,000 years ago, I think, in this area. And you have modern day stories not far from there in Sumatra, in these jungles where there's rhinos and tigers and elephants. You have stories of a hairy man-like creature that very similar to the description of fossil evidence of a creature.
I think you're going to say very similar to you two.
I was going to say it might have been
probably a little shorter, but
so similar to like going back to like Cro-Magnon.
So
Homo
they think that
erectus.
I'm not a scientist. I don't pretend to be. I like to read a lot, but this hobbit creature they say was kind of it was related to human beings, so similar. We don't know if they had like culture or
And just over time kind of developed the way it did.
Yeah, it's like you had, like you said, Cro-Magnons, you had the Neanderthals, you had the Denisovans, you had all these things that were kind of human-like, not exactly human, but they're similarly related to us.
But then on the other side, you have stories of different villages and people of giants, right?
There's stories of giants everywhere. Yeah, pretty much all over the world there's stories of giants. So I mean, a lot of people like to think, and I'm not super into the giant stuff, but there's a lot of conspiracies now.
Like the Anunnaki.
Yeah. There's like the Smithsonian's hiding the bodies.
Game of Thrones.
The theory I've heard, which is pretty interesting.
Gulliver's Travels.
It's like
exactly.
The theory I heard was that the Anunnaki, which was like one of the founder races for Homo sapien, they basically allegedly came to the earth and infused their genetics with Homo erectus, and the early hominids that did not get hybridized became what is like known as like the Sasquatch.
I've heard, there's all kinds of crazy stuff. I mean, like I'm not super into that stuff, but the Anunnaki, it's like the Sumerians talked about them. Nobody really knows who they were or what they were, but they, people like to say that they were some kind of like race from space or something. Like, I don't know. I mean, I don't think anybody really knows, because how can you possibly go back to that period? But yeah, you got people now too that are more like into the Bible to think the Nephilim, fallen angels, are like that's what Sasquatch is. Like you would not believe, man. Some of the, especially in like YouTube comments, probably some of the craziest people on earth are on YouTube comments. Like that you mention something in a video and they'll be like, oh, it's the Nephilim. And then it'll be like boomer text of 3 paragraphs, all caps, of like just some kind of misquoting scriptures and talking about the Nephilim. And it's like,
how did you get into, or how did you end up picking Bigfoot as the thing that you want to go after?
I mean, I guess Bigfoot I find it interesting. It's not like my favorite topic. I find lake monsters pretty fascinating, but I mean, that's limiting to certain geographic areas. You have to go to Lake Champlain or a certain place.
Bigfoot was definitely the most mainstream, though, right? Would you say for like public?
I'd say nowadays, probably. At least in the last 10 years, yeah, probably.
The folklore and people's willingness to embrace it kind of like ebbs and flows. And I feel like we're on like another upswing where people are interested.
Definitely. I
Like
mean,
the Bigfoot fetish people.
Like I've been into it for a long time, even before when I was just like an enthusiast. I mean, there was shows that would come out, there would be enthusiasm or some kind of famous incident would happen or a piece of footage and there'd be interest and then it would like ebb and flow. But now I think there's a lot more interest just because there's a ton of podcasts, there's a ton of different pieces of media on it. And I don't know, for me, it's the most interesting to investigate because where do you get to go? You get to go to some of the most beautiful remote parts of nature. And that's something for me as somebody who likes to explore, I think it's a perfect kind of marriage of not only, I'm a huge backpacker and hiker and I've always been into that kind of side of it and survivalism. So you kind of combine a lot of those passions. So you can go to places like the Northeast here in New England, go to the White Mountains or remote wilderness in Maine. And then you go to Alaska, you go to British Columbia, the swamps of Florida, as we talked about. There's a lot of different places. So, and it's interesting that these stories all come out of very similar locations. You have pieces of wilderness around the country, around North America. You don't have people reporting sightings from like little patches of woods in Brooklyn.
Yeah.
Right.
There's a really interesting consistency that I think for me is part of it too, because there's people that I've talked to, and I've talked to a couple hundred witnesses at this point, some more credible than others, but some that are really compelling that, I mean, they don't want anything to do with this story. And it's like pulling teeth to even get them to tell you their story, yet they are, and especially if there's somebody like, they have a very credible position in their life. Maybe they're pretty well off. Maybe they work in government. Not that makes them credible, but they got to a position, perhaps not to go on
Joe Biden's out there with the flashlight hunting Sasquatch.
But right, you're right. There was a stigma to people who would come
like
out and say these things.
Like a police officer, right? Like they're trusted, and they get to a point where they're supposed to be a trusted person. So for them to make up a story about seeing a giant ape man cross the road in front of them, and then they don't want to tell anyone, and like I have had people tell me their stories, and they're like, you can't ever put my public info out there. Like I will share this with you, and that's it. And it's like, what are they going to gain from that? If anything, if I was to put their information out there, they'd probably lose credibility in their lives based on that. So, but you have, again, the consistency of some of the sightings, people in different parts of the country that don't know each other, especially those pre-internet stories from 30, 40 years ago.
Right. Or not even people who are adventurers like yourself, but the townspeople all have similar
like the people
stories.
in Willow Creek.
Yeah, like random people that, again, it doesn't make sense that they would all make up the same behaviors in these creatures, especially, like I said, those pre-internet stories 30, 40 years ago, and they're all reporting similar behaviors and that kind of speaks to a consistency in my view that a species would have. Like if you go to try to study black bears, you could go to different states, they're going to have a similar behavior because they are the same type of animal, right? So why is it that people in British Columbia are reporting the same stuff as some folks in Pennsylvania or parts of Oklahoma in terms of getting rocks thrown at them, hearing wood knocking type sounds?
They really knock wood. I saw a video of you. I forget where you were.
Where the hell were we going with that?
Yeah, right.
This could
taking a dump.
derail quick.
No, you have like a little baseball bat, right?
I got that from Cliff Barrickman's museum.
And he's going on the tree,
That was actually
knocking
crazy.
it, and then you put your night vision on, and you just see eyes staring at you.
That was weird. Yeah, we were in Utah. We were like backpacked. My buddy and I backpacked up into. We were like a 10,000 foot elevation. We were in this alpine lake in the high Uintas Mountains in Utah, and we got stopped dead in our tracks by something either throwing stuff or smashing a tree. And we were kind of like, okay, this stuff always happens when you least expect it. Like we're just hiking. It's night. We're trying to get to a place to camp because we want to go to this alpine lake in the morning. It's like a 6-mile hike at the 10,000 foot elevation mark. I mean, no, there's less oxygen, so you're getting your ass kicked up there by the elevation. And we just get stopped by this stuff knocking. And then it was really weird because every time we turn our lights off, and I would try to respond with my baseball bat, wouldn't get anything. And every time we turn our lights on, you then hear another knock, from this direction. Then we'd hear one from the other side, and we're like, okay,
what do you think that is?
This is weird. Like, I mean, is it why would an elk do something?
Is it just
like
a
that, right?
primal
What is a mountain lion
reaction?
doing that kind of thing?
So do you think these
It's not a
creatures
person.
these creatures like kind of pick up like psychically that you guys are putting out like the intention
I
to.
don't know. I don't know if it's that or if it's just random. I mean, you're just a lot like most people that I've talked to that have had a Sasquatch sighting or something like that. I think is credible. It's random. Like they were driving on the road or they were hiking on the Appalachian Trail and this thing ran in front of them. Or same thing if they're driving. They didn't ask for it. They were just kind of out there. And it just happened. I mean, just like you might run across a mountain lion or run across a bear, or very rarely, doesn't mean they don't exist. They're out there, right? People are having encounters, but not as much as, say, a deer or a moose, animals that are, there's more of them. They're not predators.
For the people you've talked to, though, is height ever brought up into it? Like people who got close enough to be like, it was 6'10", it was 6'8".
Yeah.
It's the big thing we're dealing with, right?
Mutombo.
Got drafted for the Pistons.
Yeah, right? I mean, I don't know, man. Bigfoot, yeah.
Picked
Bigfoot
in the first round, Anthony Davis.
I mean, it does come up, but here's the thing. I think, I've heard people tell me they saw it was like 12 feet. And I'm like, I find that hard to believe. I think when people, unfortunately, witnesses, and this is not a slight against witnesses, but people are terrible observers, right? So you can misremember details like that. I have, I could imagine someone saw a Sasquatch, but in that moment, there's adrenaline going on. Your senses aren't exactly 100%. And maybe something that was 7 feet tall seems like it was 12. Because that moment, you're looking at something that's not supposed to exist. Everyone tells you it's not. And I've talked to people that, again, I really believe they saw something. I can't tell them what it is or be 100% certain. But, I mean, some of the folks I've talked to, it just doesn't make sense that they would make a story like this up and then just sit on it. Like, they're not trying to get famous with that story. They're not trying to get on TV. They have this encounter happen, and I hear about it, and it's like I have to work hard to gain their trust so they can even tell me this story. Right. So why would they make this up? And on top of that, some of these people have PTSD. Right. I know people who are hunters that will not go back into the same patch of woods ever again because of what they saw. And they're these big, tough hunting types that probably wouldn't get scared easily.
So Sasquatch is a predator, 100%, right?
I don't. We don't know.
I
would assume. I mean,
a wood-knocking predator.
A wood-knocking predator. Yeah. You'd assume, right? I don't know, but. I mean, they've been seen. So in New England, there's been sightings in northern Maine and New Hampshire of blueberry picking. So people who are out blueberry picking, it's like quite a few people thinking they're seeing a black bear, and all of a sudden it stands up on two legs and walks off like a human, and they're like, well, that obviously wasn't a black bear. Then there's been sightings, with deer and other types of like hogs. I heard of a couple of sightings down south, people seeing hogs being taken because there's a lot of those like in Texas and down in just the whole southern region.
There's a lot of wild boar down there. Huh?
Yeah, they're all over the place. I mean, like in Louisiana, when I was down there, and in Arkansas, man, you go into the woods and you just see it's all torn up. Looks like a dinosaur ran through the area, but it's all hogs. It's wild boar and hogs. I mean, and that's why they kill so many of them, because they're invasive, first of all, so they tear through an environment. But I think the females can they give birth twice a year. And to like a pretty big litter. So those pigs just spread like wildfire.
That brings me to my next question, because when it comes to Sasquatch, and if the species is still around, what is it reproducing with? If so.
And does it need to like subsist off of like earthly foods? Like, is that why there's sightings, because it's trying to find food, or does it need to eat?
I don't know. I mean, I've heard the theory that I kind of agree with. I think I feel like a lot of the sightings people are having are probably maybe, and this is all complete speculation. Like, I have nothing to base this off of, just what people have told me, what I've heard, that kind of thing. People think maybe juveniles, because think about it, when you're a teen, you're a little more rebellious. Because you imagine if a creature that wants to stay elusive, that's hiding in these wilderness areas, why is it crossing the road in front of cars? Why would it be messing with people in their campsites? I mean, that doesn't really seem like a behavior that a stealthy animal would do. You can imagine maybe like a younger creature wanting to maybe mess around with humans, because curious if these things are apes or some kind of primates, like we are primates,
or a hybrid.
Gorillas are primates, orangutans, chimps. We're all curious. All of us, all the great apes are curious creatures by nature. We're not just, okay, I need to eat and sleep and that's it. Like, that's what a lot of animals, they live their lives like that. But primates are different. They have a curiosity. So maybe these things are out there and they just want to mess with people. Because I've talked to people that have seen them cross the car in front of them, and they're like, it scared the crap out of me, and I almost hit this thing. You can't
register what exactly you're seeing till probably after the fact, right?
Oh, a lot of people talk about how, it's like a blur. I've even heard one instance, multiple instances actually, people saying when they're having the sighting, it's almost like they feel like they've got cinder blocks on their feet. They just can't move. Right. they're sort of paralyzed in this moment of
The energy
like, what am I
changes.
looking at?
Right.
What am I? Because I mean, you're out in the woods. Imagine you run into
You're
a
starstruck.
big grizzly or something. I mean, you're probably gonna in that moment. It's either fight or flight.
Right.
But imagine it's something that's huge and it's not supposed to exist. Like it's
Right.
not an animal, and especially some of the sightings up here in New England that I've heard, like New Hampshire and Vermont. Even in the 70s and the 80s, people were like, if they'd ever heard of Bigfoot, oh, it's in California, it's in Washington, it's not out here.
Pacific Northwest, right?
Yeah, Pacific Northwest. So I know people who have had sightings out here who are like, for years, I just thought it was like a big monster. I didn't know what it was until years later I saw a show about Bigfoot. I'm like, did I see a freaking Bigfoot? Like they'd never even heard of Bigfoot. Yet they're talking about seeing something that fits the description of Bigfoot. I mean, to a T.
And you're in California and you tell someone you saw Sasquatch, their first question is, well, was he vaccinated? It's like,
So you described earlier like one of the experiences that you had, and if this is like repetitive, then let me know. But what is the closest you think you've been to Bigfoot or Sasquatch?
Yeah, it's a good question. I'm not entirely sure. I mean, so I've never had a visual sighting. I know people who have, but I've never had a visual sighting. Everything I've experienced, which is only like a handful of things, kind of just to me, I put in a category of, okay, it's not definitive. I can't say 100% what it is. I could be wrong tomorrow if I'm disproven, that's fine. But it fits like the purported behavior. So you've got alleged behavior of Sasquatches that has either been observed visually by people or is something that kind of comes up with sightings. So stuff like wood knocking. You have actual sightings where people have seen this going on. Also, someone will see one and then you'll hear wood knocking before or afterwards. So that kind of thing. So I can't say again with 100% certainty at all.
Do you ever pick up any scents? Does Bigfoot smell like shit?
Dude, I mean, the skunk ape, right?
Yeah.
Skunk
It
ape.
doesn't smell very good,
Well, isn't
How
that
he gets his name.
Isn't that kind of like what everyone agrees on? The people that have been close enough is that it smelled really good.
So, like, I'd say less than half of the sightings people report smell. So, but some, and this is what's really interesting though, when you start talking about the parallels with ape behavior. So, I've talked to plenty of people, and again, like less than half of them talk about having a smell associated with the sighting, but people do. Some people say it smells like wet dog. I've heard that a bunch. Rotting flesh.
Bigfoot's dick.
Yeah, right.
I mean, hey, we don't want to know. We don't want to know where the smell comes from.
Well, I don't know
comes from
why you
somewhere.
looked over here when you were talking about the smell and gross aspect of it.
But so gorillas can actually control their scent glands, which is crazy. Like imagine being able to control your BO. I know you'd probably use that against your enemies. Like
We're doing it right now.
it's crazy. No, but so gorillas can control that when they're angry or upset.
Like in the direction they want it to go in?
They
or-
just can release like an odor. I guess.
So it's like
a
that guy.
pheromone to defend themselves.
yeah, I think it's like imagine someone's coming into your area. Someone's coming into your house, and you're just like, I'm just going to release.
Kinda
stink
like
bomb
right now.
and-
Yeah, I'm going to
Yeah,
fart
wow.
before
I need to
Anthony
get outta
walks
here.
in.
This is gross.
So, yeah,
That's what that smell is.
Yeah, there we go. I've been
No,
trying
but
to figure it out.
But it's interesting because you have people in North America reporting smell with some of the sightings, but not all of them. So, I mean, animals live in the woods, so yeah, they take on a certain smell, but not to the level of what people have described. I've also heard this multiple times. People have told me the smell they smelled was a monkey house smell. And like I've multiple times have described, like you go to the zoo, you go to the monkey house, that's the smell I was getting in the middle of the woods while having an encounter. So to get back to your question about, the closest, might be when I was up in Alaska. There's a place up there, buddy of mine who owns a property up there. He's actually originally from Massachusetts.
Just
but
a casual trip to Alaska.
casual trip.
Oh,
yeah.
yeah.
Just
Remote location.
Just
Yeah.
gonna go
but-
right up there.
So no, this guy, he's originally from Massachusetts and he's got a remote property out there on the Kenai Peninsula in Alaska. Built it. It's in the middle of nowhere. It takes you over an hour to get there by a boat. And you're in these unbelievable wilderness mountains. It's a temperate rainforest around there. So I've been up there twice now. I went 2022, we went for a week. And then this past summer, we went for 2 weeks. And that first trip out there, we had a bunch of stuff happen. And one night we were sitting around this fire pit, and it's crazy because there's the cabin and you're in this bay. There's just nothing else there. And there's 3,000, 4,000 foot mountains all around you. And it's a rainforest. So you've got brown bears out there, moose, Sitka black-tailed deer, mountain goats. Just
You get Kodiak bears?
not there. So Kodiak Island is not far from the Kenai Peninsula, but
Okay.
they're a specific type of bear that are even larger than the normal brown bears. They're monsters. I've never seen a Kodiak bear because I haven't been to Kodiak Island, but some of the brown bear sightings even on the Kenai Peninsula, I mean, they will kill you. They're an ambush predator. So when you're out there, we're always armed. But we're in this upper fire pit. So you got the cabin, and there's this big hill that goes above above the cabin, and it's just thick rainforest, and there's a fire pit up there, and we would go up there a lot. There's been some incidents that have happened there. So there's 4 of us sitting up there, and we're just kind of hanging out by the fire. And all of a sudden, in the middle of us hanging out, you just start hearing these like a wood knock type sound, very loud. And we're all like, shh, did you guys just hear that? So we all kind of shut up for a second. We're all scrambling to try and get our cameras and thermal devices ready. And then it sounds like what to me sounded like stuff being thrown from the top of the hill. Kind of, so, if I'm facing the fire, if that table is the fire, I had my back towards the water, and the hill would have been right there. So the rest of the guys around the fire, the sounds to me were coming from my right. So if I'm facing the fire, it sounded like stuff was being thrown into the water. I mean, you would hear something hitting trees along the way, and then distinctly what sounds like a rock smashing the shoreline, which is dotted with rocks, and then a splash in the water. So it wasn't just like a water splash where you could say it was a seal or an otter. It sounded like stuff was being thrown. And then another very clear wood knock. And we're all kind of like really caught off guard. But we're trying to get our cameras and everything. And that was just a really weird incident.
Did you start knocking back?
We did a few, yeah. We didn't hear
Nice.
anything back. Yeah, you got to do the knock back.
Yeah, I know, dude.
So
You're
you
the
got to let
knock-
them know what you noticed.
You're the knock man.
Never
I saw you
had
wood
to
knocking
knock on
outside
wood.
before you walked
Yeah,
in.
I mean, I had to check if you guys had any around here.
Well, you were knocking on the door, and I was like, "What the hell?"
He's got a
What is that,
baseball
man?
bat on the door.
So do you feel like Alaska is one of the most fruitful areas for the sightings because of the biodiversity and remoteness? of
Maybe.
it?
I mean, it definitely would be a good place because, I mean, it's so remote. I drove up there this last summer, and I mean, you drive up there and you like I've been to parts of North America, the lower 48 as it's called, Northern California, Washington, the Rockies. Like there's some very remote, beautiful places. Northern Maine, millions of acres of wilderness. Like there's some great habitat, but then you go up to a place like British Columbia, Canada, the Yukon, and Alaska, and I mean, there's nothing like it basically in the world except for maybe parts of Siberia where nobody lives because it's the same type of habitat. There's just nothing up there. There is so much space. So driving up, we drove the Alaska Highway, and I mean, you could just go a mile off of the highway at any point basically and be gone forever. Like no one would find you. There's still so much wilderness out there. It's actually kind of frightening. If you've flown up to Alaska, you sort of see it if you get a window seat. But I mean, driving up, there's a different feeling. You get a feeling for it. So, I mean, there's parts of the British Columbia and the Yukon and Alaska that there could be anything out there. I mean, nobody really knows, right? So there's tons of habitat. People tend to live in certain areas, the cities and whatnot. So, yeah, Alaska is really interesting. I mean, it's one of the most beautiful places in the world, too. So.
As far as New England's concerned, what would you say out of the states, I suppose, has the most stories you've heard, the most sightings?
I mean, I've heard the most stuff out of New Hampshire because I'm from New Hampshire, so I think I've focused on that. Like, I know there's a lot of stories from Vermont. I just personally haven't, I haven't spent a lot of time looking into those stories. I know friends who do, though, and people who have. But I guess so New Hampshire would be the answer because when I started looking into reports and actually taking reports from people around 2016, I focused in New Hampshire. Maine's another good one. Problem with Maine is that it's almost twice as large as New Hampshire, and it's about the same population. It's like just over 1 million. And the whole northern part of Maine where all that wilderness is, there's nobody up there. So you have old logging stories and people who have seen stuff, but they're so few and far between because up there in Maine, you've got like 50,000 moose. I mean, they got the most moose in the U.S. outside of Alaska. It's a lot. And that's a lot of giant animals.
The moose will kill you too, right?
They're scary, man.
You
Moose
think
are
bear
scary.
is the ultimate predator in the
Moose
woods.
are more
but-
dangerous than bear, statistically speaking. Like if we're talking about Alaska, more people get attacked every year by moose than they do bear.
Yeah.
Like the moose will attack you, or is it just
Oh, yeah.
like collateral damage?
They're
of the-
huge. I mean, think about it this way: you've got a 700 to 1,200 pound animal, 700 pounds to 1,200 pounds, and they're basically just this giant mass of meat on popsicle sticks. So like people hit a moose, that'll destroy your vehicle. A lot of people die in moose collisions.
One of our good friends, he had a old Monte Carlo in high school, and he was actually visiting Plymouth State.
Oh yeah.
Destroyed. Car
Brutal.
totaled. Completely totaled.
It's like because you're hit where, especially how tall they are. I mean, their legs are huge, so you're hitting right where their legs are at, and then that giant.
Yeah,
it's just like
the antlers went
700
right.
pounds of meat just falling right on your fucking windshield.
I couldn't
Am I allowed to curse? I'm good.
Oh, yeah.
I couldn't believe the
The carnage.
The antlers went through.
Oh, Jesus! Yeah.
I couldn't believe it.
I mean, you might as well just hit a big oak tree or something. It's the same effect. I mean, you're going to be screwed either way. But I mean, I was camping one time in northern Maine with my brother. We were up in the North Maine woods, wilderness. I mean, up there's nothing. He wakes me up at like 6 a.m. and he's like, "Dude, do you hear that?" And there's just the ground is shaking and this stomping kind of noise. And this huge moose runs right past our tent. Runs. I mean, I saw the silhouette over the tent. And I don't know what I had, like a shotgun or something at the time. I'm gripping it thinking like, dear God, don't let this thing come through the tent. I think it was because we were camped on a riverbed. So the river was right there and it was like a marsh. So, and then another one ran by. And I'm like, holy shit. And I could hear him down in the water. So I couldn't get the tent unzipped quick enough. So I ripped the bottom of it and just stuck my head out because I wanted to see him. And there's this huge mama moose and a baby just right there in the marsh, maybe, less than 100 feet from us. She just took one look at me and just huffed and then ran off in the other direction. And they took off into the woods. But I mean, it's crazy. You feel the power because the ground was shaking and you could and especially when they ran right by, my brother and I are like, holy shit.
What's your advice to people if they have confrontation with a moose?
I mean,
unarmed? What should I do?
Be careful. I don't know if you can. I mean, the thing is with the moose, the problem is...
Be careful.
Well, do you
run? Be respectful.
Do you yell?
Do you go down?
Think you can, no, so,
do you fawn? You look good.
So I think it was interesting. Yeah.
Hey, moose.
Are those Gucci?
What's going on?
The thing about moose is that they're not very smart animals. So they have a very small brain. Apparently their eyesight isn't very good.
Really?
Their hearing, or maybe it's their hearing that's not good. I don't know. But they're not very smart, so there's not a lot you can do.
You hate moose, huh?
I love moose. I love moose. They're great.
Have you ever eaten moose?
I have. It's
moose
delicious.
soup?
Oh, it's not soup. I've had moose steaks. Moose steaks and sausage, where they, my buddy in Alaska, he got sausage made out of moose that he killed, and they mixed it with jalapenos and cheddar.
Ooh.
I was so good. I mean, I can't tell you how good that is. And then the moose steaks, delicious. It's just like a little gamier than maybe... beef. I think it's different than beef though, but it's delicious. I mean, it's good meat.
Are you a hunter?
I'm not. No. I want to get into it a little bit more, but I never grew up hunting because my parents, they grew up in communism. They didn't really I didn't get to learn any of that kind of stuff.
Yugoslavia is a tough place.
Yeah, I mean, there wasn't a lot of hunting is not as big as culturally, But
have you ever had yak meat?
I've not had yak meat. No.
Have
you tried yak?
No, I want to. I mean, the gamiest I've had, I guess, like bison, but that's Hannaford's.
I find bison's pretty good.
Or venison.
Venison's
I don't even know if
good,
I've had venison.
Do you know because I have friends that hunt and they say
venison's good.
Because when people say venison, other people be like, "Oh, it's really gamey," but it actually depends on how you kill it. They say if you don't kill it properly and right away, then their adrenaline's pumping.
Kill.
Their adrenaline's pumping, and that's what makes it gamey.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I've had a bunch of in South Africa. I had we had warthog, kudu, which
kudu?
Is like this giant. It's like a giant antelope with these spiral antlers. It's crazy. Look up kudu. I mean, they're a cool looking animal, and they farm them. And we tried antelope. I've tried crocodile. I've had alligator in Florida. What's the gamiest thing I've ever had? Oh my God, probably Greenland shark. Disgusting. I tried it in Iceland. Dude, oh my God. Gross. You want to talk about bad? Yeah, so I was in Iceland, oh gosh, maybe like 2017 or something like that. Iceland's a beautiful place, but those freaking Norwegian, Scandinavian people, they eat some weird, disgusting
How was it
stuff.
prepared, the shark?
So this is crazy, right? So the Greenland shark is one of the oldest animals on Earth. Like they found a Greenland shark that's over 400 years old. I mean, that's older than America. And it's still alive. And so what happens is the people, it's crazy, right? Like
That's insane.
and they eat these in Iceland, right? Because they eat sharks and they eat whales and whale blubber. And you could try that there too, but I could not bring myself to do it. I'm like, that's disgusting. And so Greenland shark, how the skin is so acidic that they have to dry it. They have it outside on like they dry age it and kind of smoke it for 6 months before it's edible. And I use the word edible very loosely.
Yeah, I was going to say.
So we went to this shark farm somewhere in Iceland. I don't remember. It was like the western part of Iceland, and there's like a shark farm. Because it's a small country, you can drive around it in like a week, and that's what we were doing. Go to this shark farm, and you're eating. They pair it with this nasty ass bread, and so they put a little piece on there. And I remember, like it literally just touched my mouth, and I was already vomiting. It's that I found it that repulsive.
What did it taste
so
like?
Gross.
If you could compare it to anything.
I mean, I don't know. I was gonna say ass. But
Tastes like ass?
Ass is probably better than that. No, dude, it was just like, imagine the grossest, saltiest, like slimiest, fishy kind of
Ass.
the smell. Like
this is going down a bad
this
path.
this is not good. Okay, well,
So
put it
you
this
had
way.
a swamp ass Reuben.
It's fucking nasty. Fucking nasty. Oh, but so then this is the funny part, right? I bought some as like I was gonna give it to like some of my coworkers at the time as a gag gift. Like, oh, here's some literally
nice-
gag
what a
gift.
nice guy.
There's some cuisine from where I was.
So this is crazy. They sell this like it's in a little freeze dried packet of this like shark meat, and it was only like $3-4 for a little chunk. And I bought a few, and I'm like, oh, this is great. And I'm like, am I okay to like fly with this? And like, yeah. My cousin, he goes to America all the time with a suitcase full of it. I'm like, are you fucking kidding me? That's crazy. So on our drive back to Reykjavik, which is the capital, everything is just smelling fishy all of a sudden. I'm like, oh my God, this is nasty. And that shit still smells through the damn packaging. It's that strong. I'm like, that guy's full of shit. So we get to the hotel in Reykjavik, and I'm like, I cannot fly with this shit. And I gave it to the hotel workers, and they were all like super excited, like, oh, why would you waste this great meat? Because they love that shit. And I'm like, dude, I don't know, man. It's a little much for me. So yeah, Greenland shark. That's one of the grossest things. The other grossest thing I ever ate was probably in Korea. In South Korea, I had this dish it's raw. It's a plate of raw beef with raw egg yolks, and they take these octopus and they cut it up so that they put the tentacles on the plate and it's still wiggling around and moving because the animal's dead, but the nerves are still moving.
I like octopus. It sounds
and that's
okay.
a delicacy. So it's like I'm like, what's with the raw beef and the raw egg, and then the squirming tentacle? I'm like, I'm gonna have to get drunk, and I'm like, you got to give me some soju before I'm gonna eat this thing. But that was probably the second weirdest thing I've ever eaten.
Are you the type that you'll try anything once when
For
it
the
comes
most
to
part,
food?
yeah, within reason.
Answer me this: if anybody ever did catch and kill a Sasquatch, would you have a Sasquatch cutlet?
Probably not.
It might be high in
I
protein.
don't know, man. Because you think about it, it's like, would you if someone offered you like a gorilla steak, would you eat a gorilla steak? I feel like it'd be weird.
I feel like you want to keep all the Sasquatch meat for research and like
Yeah,
DNA
I probably
analysis.
wouldn't. I
and
probably
I
wouldn't.
feel like it would make you really sick.
maybe like a sea monster, like Loch Ness.
Because some people
Have a
say,
Loch Ness cutlet. Like, yeah, I'd
How
try
dare
it.
you?
because some people
How
that
dare you?
Yeah, fish and chips,
Loch
Nessie
Ness-
style.
some people say like because there's people out there that eat bear and they say be careful about
I've
that because
heard-
bears eat everything.
Yeah, I've heard people say. I mean, I don't know. I've heard people say mountain lion tastes good. I'm like, but I've heard that predators don't usually taste good because they have a very acidic stomach.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I don't know if that really makes sense. I've never tried bear. I've just heard stories of people eating it, but I don't know. I mean, I think some of the game meats like seems good enough. Like I don't know. I've tried buffalo, bison. Like I said, some of the stuff in Africa, pretty good. I mean, that stuff's really good, especially the way in South Africa, some of these like farms they have with these things like kudus and antelope. I mean, it's a farm, but they have a lot of space to run around. So you're getting as close to like a wild caught one as you could basically get. But elk's pretty good too. Elk and buffalo / bison are pretty good in terms of like North American standards, at least from what I've had. So
Do you want to take the crossbow and try hawk?
yeah, let's go.
We could do that.
So in terms of sea creatures, have you had any sightings and what is like the way Sasquatch is like the big dog for terrestrial creatures is
Right.
Loch Ness the big dog for sea
Yeah, I'd
creatures?
say Nessie. I mean, I did my first ever documentary I did on these topics was about Nessie. And it was like a little crappy
Wait, you
12
already
minute.
have a nickname for it?
That's what they
Well,
call it
everyone
in
does.
Scotland,
Nessie.
right?
That's like,
Is
Nessie's
there a
like
drop
the
kick?
name.
Is there a
Yeah.
Dropkick Murphy song?
There should be.
Those bagpipes
Gotta
just
get
come
back
out of the
off
water.
to
to
Yeah.
Nessie. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean, I did a short thing on Nessie back in the day because I'd always been interested in Loch Ness. Right? You hear about it, you want to go there. Like it's cool.
No, some of us don't want to go there.
It's a really small body of water, right? Like
It's
It's a
man,
puddle.
I don't know how big it is. Like
It's the retention pond out
20
back.
something miles
waiting
long,
pool.
maybe.
yeah, which is I guess that's
It's like compared to Lake Champlain. Lake Champlain's gigantic. It's like 123 miles long, 12 miles wide, and you got the Lake Champlain monster up here in Vermont. I just found it was ironic that I was interested in the Loch Ness monster, even though Lake Champlain's only a few hours away. So I did a documentary series on Lake Champlain back in like 2017, 2018. And that was interesting. And it's it's kind of like in that we were talking about earlier, the urban legend realm. Like, is there something in the lake? I don't know, but there's all these stories going back hundreds of years. Is it just people want to believe there's something there. So any normal thing they see then becomes part of that myth. I think it's a lot of these topics. It's more of an exploration into human nature. Why are we so interested in these mysteries? Why do we see these things?
Well,
I think some of them are real, like I said, but some like you've got stuff like the Mothman. That's more supernatural, paranormal. You've got UFOs, Men in Black involved in that. Like, so that's not like I don't expect there to be a physical Mothman. I mean, that's like if you've seen the Mothman prophecies, that's associated with that whole bridge collapse in West Virginia and all the weirdness. That's like more high strangeness, which is more on the paranormal side of things.
Have you heard the theory that whales and dolphins are some of our closest like relatives, and that whales and dolphins exist extraterrestrially too? On
Dude,
other
there's
planets?
some weird animals. I mean, they got that. Dolphins are really smart. Wicked smart with the
Dan Marino, not so much, but
the infrasonic. They communicate. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's weird because we have. What is it like? We're like 98% similar to chimps, right?
Yeah.
And gorillas and all those kinds of apes. But look how different we are. And then we're like 95% with all other creatures. I don't exactly know the exact numbers, but it's interesting once you kind of think about it that way.
Have you gone underwater like in a significant distance to explore this, or do you just stay above?
I mean, when I was in Lake Champlain, I had some scuba divers that were working with me, and they were diving down there. But I like went swimming. That's about it, I guess.
But you're a land guy. You're a wilderness guy.
I mean, water is one of those things that's interesting. I think what's so interesting about it is
it's frightening. It's
frightening.
It's terrifying.
Like, I would not want to go down there.
Man. Dude, we go to Aruba almost every year.
Yeah.
And all we've ever been told is no sharks. Last year we went shark.
I know.
So it's
really just the unknown.
We can't understand it, right? Because there was this cool website I found, and this guy made a chart. You could scroll down to see how deep the deepest part of the ocean was. I was shocked at how much animals and life there still was in the depths of the ocean.
They really can't go all the way down. The pressure's too
they've done
much.
Yes, most people, like most creatures can't.
Yeah, Marianas Trench. They know there's a bunch of species down there.
There's like these weird little like Yeti crab things that live down there, and they feed off of what's called water snow or something like that. It's like this materials that float in the bottom of the ocean.
Yeah,
really weird. So I don't know. I think water's so mysterious that we don't understand it. So that's why you have that fear of like the Jaws effect. People, they're uncomfortable in large bodies of water. A lot of people, because you don't know what's down there. There could be anything. I mean, we know more about the surface of the moon apparently than we do about the depths of the ocean.
Yeah,
so,
that submarine that went down.
They
say
literally just took
my
joke.
They were saying
mouth.
they discovered a new race of a moron. I think.
Okay, I wasn't gonna go that.
You got the PlayStation controller. That's we could use that to pilot our remotes.
I'm not a PlayStation guy. Xbox.
I heard you talk about this on one of your videos. I actually went to a wedding up there last summer. It was Ossipee Lake in New Hampshire.
Oh yeah.
And like the sightings that have been up there, and I even heard you drop the name Aleister Crowley.
Yeah, that's some crazy stuff. So I don't know a whole lot about it, but the Ossipee mountain range in New Hampshire is like a geographic circle. It's a really weird, geologically speaking, area. And there's supposedly, when Aleister Crowley was in the U.S., and he's kind of this well-known occultist type.
The most wickedest man.
Yeah, right. I mean, he's a weird character. He did a lot of these weird...
He was a Satanist.
He was at Loch Ness. I mean, there's that house he had, the bolus skin house.
Him and Nessie were tight.
Some people think he conjured up Nessie. The people that are into the paranormal stuff, I shit you not, they think that.
Yeah, he had a house in Sicily, too, and he was thrown out of Sicily because of like all the weird shit he was
stuff,
doing.
Yeah. So he actually supposedly heard this from these guys. Oh, gosh, what was the name of their... They were like into more of that high strangeness stuff. They were here in Mass. What was their name? Mandate 33, something like that. This guy Bill Darman. I don't remember the YouTube channel, but they were like go up and hike in this area, and they supposedly there was some kind of sacrificial table up there that Aleister Crowley was on Shaw Mountain in the Ossipee Range, and supposedly he was going up there to look for stuff. I don't know much more than that because apparently there was a fire up there and this table was lost. But I know those guys spent some time trying to find where this was. So supposedly Aleister Crowley was there, but there's been like Bigfoot sightings.
Well, that's my question exactly. It's like, do you think they coincide or at least brush elbows a little bit, right? Because if there's activity in that world, maybe there's activity in your world.
Well, maybe. I mean, that's some people think Bigfoot's paranormal. I mean, I personally don't, but there's all kinds of theories. I mean, I don't know ultimately which one's right, which one's wrong.
What is your definition of Bigfoot? If some stranger asks you that, what would you tell them?
I'd probably say what I think Sasquatch is some kind of an undiscovered or at least unrecognized hominid or hominin, so something closely related to humans, perhaps, but it's sort of I don't want to say it's like a divergent evolution thing where it's just adapted to living in these environments.
So we share some DNA, you think?
Well, yeah, like I said, we share DNA, so much DNA with just chimps.
To go back into something else happening in New Hampshire, which is probably the most popular one aside from Bigfoot, is it Barney and Betty Hill?
Yeah, the Barney and Betty Hill abduction. Yeah, that's more on the UFO side. I mean, if you go up to like Franconia Notch in that area, there's Indian Head Resort. They got a sign right there, Betty and Barney Hill abduction. I don't know a whole lot about it. I just know it's one of the most famous cases in like the UFO community.
Well, they were back to tell their story, right?
Yeah, right. They supposedly, had these experiences. And I know a guy who, one of the last people to interview Betty Hill before she passed away in the 90s, he interviewed, I think. And she always had some pretty wild stories about stuff that was going on. But you see now, like with the UFO community, how it's like
Diamond doesn't
blowing up.
It's not. It doesn't even make headlines anymore. It's like,
and that was like the first big incident back in the day.
And nobody believed him, I'm sure.
No, but a lot of people didn't. Yeah, until years later. But then you had like the Roswell thing.
Was that Brazil?
Roswell,
New Mexico.
New Mexico. Yeah, 1947, I think. I'm not super into UFOs, despite having seen one, which is like the craziest thing I've ever seen. I've never seen Bigfoot, anything like that, but I've seen it.
Well, tell us about that.
Yeah. What? Well, because I also have like an experience with it, which like I was in Mexico and I still have, somewhere in here, I still have the newspaper clipping like the next day.
Oh.
We all saw it. It was so big, but it was whatever it was
Where
coming.
in Mexico?
Cozumel.
Oh, Cozumel. Yeah. Interesting.
That's an illegal alien. No, we're talking about ones that
The news clipping.
I just couldn't believe it.
Wrong type of alien.
I saw some. Wasn't that high up? It was on a fence.
Oh God.
You're all canceled.
Yeah.
Well, no, I'd love to hear it
mean,
because that's one of the things that I like outside of ghosts.
Yeah, right.
It's one of the cool things.
It's funny because I'm not really into it, but that's like what got me into it. Like even like I've hiked all the mountains up in New Hampshire, and I know about the Betty and Barney Hill thing, but it never really like caught my attention.
I have a question. Have you ever heard of the term slipwalking?
Slipwalking? No. What is
So
that?
when someone leaves a banana peel. No, it's a term I've heard like that the way
like slipping between things?
slipping through dimensions.
Okay.
Like a theory that
I've heard the theory, but I've never heard.
Yeah,
it
so it's like
way.
that's what Sasquatch can do, and that's why it's
I've
so
heard
difficult.
that. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. The problem is once you get into, I'll get into the UFO story in a minute, but what like my issue with some of the more paranormal side of like the Bigfoot stuff, which is getting popular. I think it's more sensational. The problem is there's you could basically make anything up and people will probably believe you. There's a ton of people who fake stuff all the time with this topic and every paranormal topic.
How do you feel about that? People that, because this is kind
It's
of
stupid.
You're in the business of truth in a sense, right?
I mean, we absolutely keep it on the level, especially at Small Town Monsters. Like I'm in a place where I don't have a big network TV, network telling me, hey, you got to fake this, you got to fake that, because we're just trying to make revenue. Like I get to do these investigations the way I want to. I don't have to lie to anyone and say, oh yeah, we saw there was definitely a Bigfoot here. Like, no, I find that stupid. But my problem with some of the paranormal side of things is there's too much conjecture. So again, we talked about like people being poor observers and poor eyewitnesses, misremembering certain details. If you see like an orb glowing in the woods and then you see a Bigfoot afterwards, you assume that they're related. What if you saw an orb in the woods and then a deer ran out? Are you going to make the assumption the deer is paranormal right off the bat?
Yeah.
Unless you're like thinking it's a Wendigo or something, but that's even more terrifying. But no, I don't know. I think it's with the Bigfoot topic. I generally, you're looking at one mystery, but then you're trying to explain it with another. Like whatever these things are, and maybe I could be totally wrong. Maybe they are paranormal. I don't know. I mean, nobody has the answers. Otherwise, we wouldn't be talking about it, or we'd be talking about it with more certainty. But whatever it is, it's still leaving some kind of physical impression. I mean, it's throwing stuff. Like I said, I've experienced stuff. Sounds like it's being thrown. That's a physical interaction.
And you get the feeling, I'm sure, that there's a difference between rocks falling or somebody's throwing something at you.
Yeah, you can definitely tell the
difference. Do you get that feeling when you're out there that something's watching you?
I've had it happen once, and it was really weird because
Sorry.
It was weird though, man. I'm telling you, this was the strangest thing I've ever had happen, like in this element. So I was with a buddy of mine, and we're in an area that has a history of Sasquatch kind of reports in New Hampshire. actually. I won't say where, but I've kind of done a little bit of research there over the years. And I took a buddy out there night hiking. It was during COVID, during the lockdowns. I was going there like every day because there was nothing else you could do. I was commuting back and forth from Boston for work at the time. COVID hits, I'm at home all the time, working from home. There's like nothing to do, right? You just, okay, I'll go hike in the woods. And we were doing that. So my buddy was bored on a Friday night, and we're like, oh, let's go hike around in the woods at night. I mean, what better do you have to do? We go out there, and at one point, I had this, I've never felt it this strongly, this really weird, I feel like something's watching me, like you could feel it. And I'm thinking in my head, and I shit you not, the same moment I'm thinking that, my friend just says, dude, I feel like we're being watched. And I looked at him and I'm like, are you fucking kidding me? Like, what? How did you know that? He's like, dude, I don't know. I just have this weird feeling. And this is a guy I know. We used to go hiking together. Like, I know he's not just, I didn't tell him anything about this.
Well, humans have that.
It's
intuition,
weird, man. I mean, it's so weird. So, and then after that, we listened to something, what sounded like wood knocking and sticks breaking for about 10, 15 minutes. And we were like, okay, this is kind of weird. But it was just a weird kind of experience. But the UFO thing, right? I want to get to that.
Yeah.
So
I'd love you
2019,
to get to that.
I'm in Pennsylvania. We're in central Pennsylvania, a place near Du Bois, Pennsylvania. I was with a crew of guys actually here from the New England area. This guy, Paulino, he had a show called Behind the Paranormal. He was at a Woonsocket, Rhode Island, had a guy from Maine, another guy from New Hampshire. And they're all into like different things. I was the guy, they were like, oh, we need a Bigfoot guy. This area of Pennsylvania has Bigfoot stuff. Like, sure.
So you're kind of like the Avengers when it comes to...
Pretty much, yeah.
I found this on the web for Pennsylvania Bigfoot. Check it out.
Talk about being watched.
Whoa. That was crazy. But hey, maybe we'll get some insightful info from Siri over here.
So you're in Pennsylvania.
So we're out there and we're in this area that has kind of like a history of high strangeness. And I went we went 2 years in a row, and I went that first year, didn't have a whole lot happen. It was interesting. Thought we saw like a red light in the woods, but weren't 100% certain. That second year we went, we're all just out doing different kind of investigations. I was in this wooded area where there's been a Sasquatch sighting before. And we all decided there's a big thunderstorm going on. Then the sky cleared up, and we all go to meet up in this field. And this is central PA, so there's like nothing around there. It's just those little farms and then patches of woods, state forests, state game lands. There's not a lot out there. I mean, between Pittsburgh and Philly, there's nothing really. So we were like, oh, let's go stargaze. Beautiful, crystal clear sky. And we're watching planes flying over, and somebody had one of those apps that helps you kind of like, oh, you can see the satellite going over. And at one point, and there's no more clouds in the sky at all. And to my left in the sky, I see what looks like this cloud. And I thought it was a cloud with the moon behind it. I was like, this is kind of weird. And we all start noticing, and it was a smaller cloud, and it was like a undefined sort of mass. And it starts sort of moving through the sky like a leaf in slow motion is the meandering I would describe. And it's kind of moving around. And we can tell it's moving. And we all start noticing. And there's maybe 5 of us witnesses, if I'm thinking. Yeah, there's 5 of us there because we're all just sitting around a fire looking at the sky. We're checking the app. It's not registering on it. It's not very far up in the sky either. And as it's moving through the sky, it's like a illuminated cloud or a haze is how I would describe it. Then these small, I don't know, orbs or smaller defined lights fly out of it, around it, and back into it. And this happened twice, and we're like, I mean, you could hear, we're all like, holy fuck, like people, and these are some of the guys there have been into UFOs for decades, and they're like, this is the craziest fucking thing I've ever seen. So we couldn't believe it. We're just watching this thing. I had a camera with me at the time. It was a Canon 70D, but I had a fixed 10 millimeter lens because I was doing star photos. I like to do a lot of astrophotography, those long exposures. Mm-hmm. So I can't zoom in with this thing. One of the guys manages to run back to the house and grab like a pair of night vision goggles, and he starts filming this thing. So we have footage of it. It's on my website where you see these 2 objects just flying parallel, really weird, and they become one object. And we watched it for a little bit and it went over the horizon, and then it was like out of Star Wars where you see they go into hyperspace. We just see this light just zip across the sky, and we're like, this is really freaking weird.
It's a matter of what, 2 minutes, 3 minutes?
It was about like maybe 5 minutes total when we first started noticing it, and then we're all like, are we all seeing the same thing? And then we all line up and we're watching it. And I remember, I'll never forget, like at first you're kind of watching it, you're trying to figure out what it is. That moment when those little lights flew out of it, like it looked like it came from out of it and went around it and back into it. We're all like, holy fuck. Like the excitement it was like kids, experiencing something for the first time. And they're like, this is crazy. So yeah, it was wild, and I can't say what it was. I just know it was like a UFO by definition of the word, unidentified flying object. So I don't know what it was. I mean, was it secret government technology?
But-
Sure, it wasn't anything I've ever seen. I fly drones. You know, I grew up flying. My grandfather was a commercial pilot in Yugoslavia. Like, I've been around planes and you know, aerial vehicles like my whole life. So it was not anything I've ever seen personally.
Isn't that like similar though to a lot of the videos that you're seeing surfacing now?
I mean, I haven't looked into a lot of them, but
it's
maybe.
kind of like a similar story where like everybody's seeing these dispersing particles,
right.
and then they all come back together, and then you just see it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't
ship
know.
away.
I haven't seen anything like it. I mean, we showed the video to a guy who was a friend of one of the other group members, who was a video analyst for MUFON, and this guy is like an astronomer. I mean, he does like government contract work, and he's able to debunk like 99% of the videos that get sent his way, because people film stuff they're seeing in the sky, and most of it is just something they're misidentifying. That's like the vast majority. But he was like, this is really weird footage. I don't know where to, you know, I can't say it's 100% real UFO, of course, but it's in this category of I don't think it's a misidentified, you know, Tesla satellite or something like that, because that does happen too. But it was the weirdest thing I've ever seen. I like I said, I make no claims. Was it aliens? Was it the CIA? I don't know, man. But
Elon
it was
Musk.
weird. Yeah, it could have been Elon Musk, early satellite stuff. But no, it was weird. And like I said, I have the footage of it on my website. You go check it out. It's on my like blog, but you got to go back to 2019. But the footage is on there. So it was a weird incident for sure.
One other cryptid that I don't want to say hits home, but it's not far from here, and we grew up going there, was the Bridgewater Triangle. Do you know too much about it? Anything?
Yeah, I've done some stuff on the Bridgewater Triangle.
Yeah, and he actually went to college in that area.
Did you go Bridgewater?
Oh, I know all about
Bridgewater State or?
Oh, come on. No, I went to Stonehill.
Stonewall, yeah.
So I was right in the, what is it, the bottom right? Easton Stoughton is bottom right of the triangle. But yeah.
The triangle's weird, man.
It is weird.
See, this is like when we get an urban legend.
Strange, huh?
The triangle takes on a life of its own. So, I mean, I know a bunch of people who looked at it back in the day. You know the guy who coined it, Lauren Coleman. He's one of the kind of more notable cryptozoologists. He runs the Cryptozoology Museum up in Portland, Maine. I think they're moving to Bangor now.
He's got a sign there too.
Yeah,
Like
they've got
the entrance to the
Yep.
wood,
So
yeah.
he named it. He coined it, and the newspapers ran with it, Bridgewater Triangle, because at the time you had the whole Bermuda Triangle was popular.
Planes were going missing.
Yeah, and that was like people knew it, and so it was cool. And the triangle is not really a triangle. I mean, stuff happens not in a triangular pattern, but think about it. Triangles are easy for us to understand. I mean, you've got different triangles. The Emerald Triangle in Northern California, right? That's where they grow all the weed. It's called the Emerald Triangle. You know, is it a physical triangle? I don't think so.
I think a lot of people got lost in there too, huh?
Yeah, well, that's another story. Yeah, but the triangle concept is interesting. So you've had all these weird stories, but what's so cool about the Bridgewater Triangle is you've got UFO stories, you've got all the classic ghost stories, the hauntings, Bigfoot sightings, really weird. I mean, there's one story that's still fascinating from the 60s of a guy who was a police officer and says that one of these things actually lifted the back of his cruiser up and dropped it. And I know two people who have talked to him personally, and one of them said, you know, he swore by it, like he did not. And who's like what? You
It was a drunk Stonehill student. I heard.
mean, like that's you're gonna lift, especially those police cruisers back in the day. I mean, you're gonna get a guy in a monkey costume to lift up the backside of a cruiser. Like he said, it physically went up a few feet in the air and dropped.
So it checks off all the boxes at this place. Sasquatch,
It's got a lot of weird
paranormal.
Yeah, but then also what's crazy, you've got the human element.
Have you been?
Oh yeah.
Do you get a
we
feeling?
did a documentary about it 2 years ago now, and I've been to the Bridgewater Triangle in and out over the years because I got friends that investigate down there.
What does it feel like?
I mean, it's
I know you can work yourself up and be like,
yeah,
oh, it's weird.
that's what I think. A lot of people, they go to an area like the Freetown Forest,
Yeah.
considered the most haunted woods in America.
Where is this?
It's right next to Fall River, Mass. So
Oh,
that's,
okay.
That's like the southern part of the triangle is considered the Freetown Forest. Now, here's what's creepy about it, right? You've got a history of potential cult activity there, gruesome murders. I mean, it's horrific stuff. We interviewed a guy. So there's a documentary out there called The Bridgewater Triangle by a guy named Aaron Caju. He's somebody you guys should have on, but
Yeah.
he went to Fitchburg,
Okay.
Fitchburg State, and he did the documentary that's, in my opinion, the best about the Bridgewater Triangle. He's from down in the South Shore.
Yeah.
He's like right in that Fall River area. Buddy of mine, if you want help, like I said, I think he'd be a good fit because he's like a skeptic, but he talks about all this stuff, and his documentary covers so much of like the ghosts, the Bigfoot stuff, the creatures, the UFO. He interviewed people. There were these 2 cameramen for like one of the news agencies out of Boston that saw a UFO. And these guys were like super credible.
Especially if there sounds like there was rituals going on.
Well, so that's the thing.
Too.
This is what's crazy.
A lot of conjuring.
Right? There's a lot of stuff with that. There was even wasn't Netflix, but one of these streaming services did a show about this cult stuff a couple years ago, where they kind of debunked some of the cult aspects. But there's been people that have been killed out there in the Freetown Forest. So we interviewed a guy who was in this documentary, Alvin Alves. He was a former detective for the Freetown Police Department. It's probably one of the creepiest interviews I've ever done so far.
Really?
Because we're like, what's some of the weird stuff you experienced out here? He's like, well, one time we found a dead infant, trash barrel that had been put there. I mean, it got so dark. He's talking about, so there was this infamous, one of the most famous murders down there was this, I think it was in the 70s or the 80s, maybe it was the early 80s, Mary Lou Aruda. She was from, I think, Bridgewater or East Bridgewater, and she was abducted by this guy named James Cater. She went missing, and she was found later tied to a tree and dead in the Freetown Forest. I think she was decapitated. And this detective we interviewed, he was the first person on the scene. He's like, I had to wait in the woods alone with this like
headless corpse
in the woods, waiting for the crime scene and other people to show up. And he's like, that was probably one of the most disturbing things. He said there was all kinds of weird. They'd find like 30 dead calves out in the woods, like dead chickens, birds, pentagrams. Most of it's probably people LARPing to pretend to be Satanists. But there's been a lot of weird stories out of the Freetown area. He said they found a guy out there who he had been like beaten and he was like half buried, but he was still alive, and they had to amputate his legs afterwards because the cold got to him. But like it was like a drug deal gone bad, and they took the guy out there. So there's a lot of like just really scummy human activity. And out of all my journeys everywhere, the biggest conclusion I've always had is that humans are the biggest monsters. Like we ran into a weird cult in Oregon in the woods.
Yeah, actively.
Like they were doing shit and like circling our camp. It was fucking weird. Possible human smuggling in the Everglades. We ran into that last year. Like all these, I tell you, I go armed in the woods because people are the biggest thing I'm worried about, because people are fucking weird. Like, how a moose behaves or how a mountain lion might act. You can kind of try to avoid it, tie your food up, hide it away for bears. They're just kind of doing stuff on instinct, but people are unpredictable. You don't know what they're going to do. So Bridgewater Triangle, what's cool about it is you have all these like true crime stories. So if you're into that, if you're not in anything paranormal, you have enough there. But then you've also got the Bigfoot, you've got the UFOs. So it's kind of like there's so much there to cover.
It's interesting that so many legends or cryptids or whatever you want to call it seem to congregate in that place.
The Pukwudgie kind of thing. That's that supposed little Wampanoag legend. But it's back to that urban legend thing. That area is taken on a life of its own. I mean, all the time there's new podcasts coming out about the Bridgewater Triangle. There's shows. There's people are interested. And now maybe it's like kids go out there we're going to go to the Freetown Forest. And they hear a twig snap and they're like, it was a creature. But if you're in any other patch of woods, we go to the woods back here, we're not going to assume the same thing. But I think it's because that area has taken on a life of its own that it becomes, kind of part of that culture that, maybe there isn't even real stuff going on there anymore, activity. But people are still going there seeking for those experiences because it's become kind of, it's taken on a life of its own.
Where haven't you been that you want to go?
Called the North American Wood Ape Conservancy, and they have been doing one of the better groups out there that does research, like very scientific. They've been there for a while, and they have some interesting stories.
Is there any area in this country where there's this really not any activity or reports of activity?
The Midwest.
Like you wouldn't waste your time going there?
Midwest. I mean, I like places that have mountains. I mean, even down south in Florida and Louisiana, at least you have the swamps. Like they're interesting because
the bayous.
They're super fascinating. Like I went down last year and we did. I went with a buddy of mine actually for his buddy Scott from Texas. He runs the Bigfoot Mapping Project. They do like reports on their website. Great guy. He works in GIS, so he knows like mapping tech. But we went. Him and I did some kayaking out in the Atchafalaya Swamp Basin, which is one of the largest swamps in North America. We paddled out a couple miles and spent overnight out there, and he's teaching me about cottonmouth snakes and all this other stuff. So I'm fascinated by those swamp environments because there's a lot of different kind of life than maybe the mountains, what I'm used to up here. But the Midwest is one of those places that, I mean, you just don't, like, if you look at the sightings, if you go to the Bigfoot Mapping Project and you check out the sighting reports, You have like the Appalachian Mountains.
Are you involved with this website or no?
Yeah. I mean, I like supporting Scott. He's a good guy, and
Yeah.
I think he does a good job. And I tell people to report their sightings to there. So, but you look at the sightings in the East Coast, and it's all kind of around the Appalachian Mountains. Whether you're in Georgia or up to Maine, everything in between, that's generally where the sightings are happening. And then you look in the Midwest, and just sightings drop off until you get to the Rocky Mountains. Sightings start picking up again. Well, what do you have in those? Both the Appalachians and the Rockies and other areas out west, you have habitat, food, water, elk or deer or moose or different animals that might be prey species. Whereas in the Midwest, in places like I've driven through Iowa and Kansas, and there's just nothing. I mean, it's just cornfields. There's not a lot of animals in general.
Yeah.
So that's an area that I don't, maybe the upper Midwest, like Michigan into Minnesota, they have some national forests up there that connect into Canada where there's definitely a history of activity. I just haven't made it my way up there yet.
Not to go off on a tangent, but this is something that I've been thinking about as of late. And what are your thoughts on Antarctica? I know.
I don't know, man. It's weird. It's a strange place. Are we being told the whole truth about it?
Interesting.
I don't know.
Some people even think it's like the edge of the world. There,
Yeah,
like a huge
the-
wall.
More like the flat Earth stuff. I don't know enough about that stuff,
Kyrie Irving.
but I know like Antarctica, all these I don't know, you can go there, but you need like a permit to go there. It needs to be approved by the government or something. I don't know. I don't really know enough about
Does anybody
it.
in your network deal?
Not really. I mean, I know somebody not related to any of this that I think tried to go on a trip to Antarctica, like an adventure tourism kind of thing. I don't know if she ended up going or not, but
Well, there's like allegedly like pyramids under the ice.
yeah, there's all kinds of crazy stuff. I mean, we don't know.
Have you-
None of us here know about the truth of what's going on there. I know they have these facilities where they store seeds and grains in case the rest of the world goes down. And it's weird because you see all these world leaders that go to Antarctica. Like,
Right.
the presidents have been, certain leaders. Putin has been there. Like, why are all these world leaders going to Antarctica?
Because I think they feel like it's land that's like up for grabs, and maybe it's gonna start like thawing out, and they want to claim it, or like
I don't know. Yeah. I mean, who knows?
I think the newest conspiracy theory around it is it's basically like the new Area 51 because people think
Could
that
be.
Area 51 has been discovered.
Oh yeah,
and-
they've admitted it for a
Yeah.
long time. Yeah.
So-
Well, have you heard of Lemuria?
No, what's that?
So Lemuria was allegedly an ancient continent that existed like basically in between where like Africa and the Middle East is, and Australia, that entire area, like
huh.
a large continent.
So the
and
Indian Ocean.
and that
Yeah.
it shifted after some like major Earth changes, and it went down to where Antarctica is now, and it's covered in ice.
I actually haven't heard that. That's, I mean,
And they say like
Interesting.
you've heard of Atlantis,
yeah, right. I
So
was gonna say I've heard
the
of
original civilization, Atlantis, was an offshoot, they say, of
that.
Lemuria.
Interesting. Well, like the Mayans and the Aztecs talk about coming from a place called Aztlan that said that flooded and they had to escape on boats. I don't know. I mean, Atlantis, a lot of people take that story with a grain of salt. Like, you've got the stories with the Greek philosophers talking about it and saying, oh, it was just a hypothetical idea. People are like, no, it was definitely a real place. It was in the Mediterranean. No, it was in the Atlantic. That's what, like the Bermuda Triangle. Some people,
Yeah,
I remember being really into that when I was younger, and I read this Bermuda Triangle book from like the 70s, and they talked about all the different theories, and it was super cool. And one of them was, oh yeah, the reason why these boats go missing and there's all these weather anomalies is because there's the ruins of Atlantis, and this technology is throwing up
Portals,
beams. And I
Call-
mean, it's fun to think about that.
Call
right?
it conspiracy or don't, but it's interesting.
It's, I mean, who doesn't like that idea, right? Like, that is, I cannot imagine. I mean, people do live like this, that these people, all they care about is like the Kardashians and just this super stupid stuff that's so trivial, like it doesn't really matter. And I'm not,
they don't
hating on
ponder anything.
It's like, how could you not? You hear something like that, I find it interesting. That's why I'm always up for adventure and mystery and intrigue, because there's just, the world is a boring place without it.
Would you take the Kardashians with you if they wanted to go, I don't know, in the Green Mountains or something? That could be entertaining.
Probably not. I mean, I imagine the liabilities around that would be
Yeah.
would be pretty insane.
Bigfoot would just be like slapping their ass. And then
Yeah, right.
walking
Chris Jenner would invite her over for dinner.
like you were saying, the ancient history and figuring out the true history of the earth, and just debating it and investigating it is just the most fascinating thing, I think, for people over the span, as long as there's been humans on the
Yeah.
earth. It's something like, how can you be so myopic and hyper focused on
Right.
what the TV is telling you when there's such a long history that's full of question marks?
Well, especially nowadays, right? I can understand 100, 200 years ago, most human beings they were focused on their sole survival throughout human history, right? Like if you don't have enough food, you're not going to be able to survive today, or you have people hunting you or whatever. Like it's during that time period, they probably didn't have a lot of time to think about the mysteries of the world. But as our lives have gotten more comfortable over the last 100, 150 years, people have started to think about this stuff a lot more. Not that they didn't before, but more so nowadays. Because especially now, we talk about, again, these old mini computers we carry around.
Well, it's two extremes. It's either you have people that ponder these great questions, or you have people that just drown themselves in nonsense.
Well, it's exactly it, because it's how you use it, right? Because we have so much knowledge at our fingertips. You can find out almost anything, just a quick Google search, right? Yet I feel like a lot of people are stupider nowadays than they were before. It's like it's too much to handle. I don't know. Maybe, I don't know. I think some people are just wired differently. I just cannot understand people that are they have no interest on the world around them, and they're not curious about this stuff.
Yeah.
I'm like, that makes me not trust
I think
them.
there's like
weirded out.
varying degrees of like extreme like forgetting and repressing of things, and they just go, no, I'm just going to focus on like this reality in front of me.
They do say that ignorance is bliss. I feel like the more you know, the more you question, the more you're like, wow, there's a lot we don't know. Maybe it's sometimes it can be a little much. I will admit, but I would still take that over just being like completely focused on one thing and not curious about anything. I don't know. I mean, curiosity is just intrinsic to human beings. Like we're just a curious species, and that's, we talk about the primates too, like other apes, Sasquatches sound like they're curious. So it's kind of a trait that we seem to have for whatever reason. We just can't stop trying to learn about the world around us.
Do you want to plug your socials and where people can find
more for sure. You can search Small Town Monsters. That's our production company. So I guess I'll kind of explain that real quick. That's a production company. We focus on independent documentaries about various paranormal, cryptozoological topics from all over the U.S. Basically, we've got a YouTube channel. We're also on Amazon. Check out our website, Tubi. Going all over the place now. Supposedly, I heard some of our stuff's going to be physically available in like Walmarts and Best Buy and stuff soon. But we've got stuff on our website. That's a good place to find out. I've got a lot of documentaries on Small Town Monsters. Additionally, my website, Petakov Media, that's Petakov Media. It's got links to all my socials, and if you want to reach out, Facebook, or it's got links to everything on there, email, all that stuff.
Any upcoming projects? Anything to expect?
Yeah, I'm always working on new stuff. I'm going to Louisiana soon here. Filming some more stuff about the Honey Island swamp monster, which is kind of a Bigfoot legend down there. And I'm also working on a pretty cool upcoming project that's not related to Bigfoot. That's going to be about mysterious places. So that's something that I'll be announcing at some point here soon. So that should be pretty cool.
Thanks, man. I appreciate you coming down.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me.
That was a blast.
Hotel D'Amico on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, Instagram. Like and subscribe. Thanks, guys.